Hi, this video will talk about how to add a matrix, subtract a matrix, and multiply matrices by a scalar. Scalar is just a fancy word for a constant. Okay, so here I have matrix A and here I have matrix B. And the important thing to remember is that when we add or subtract matrices, they have to have the exact same dimensions, all right? So let's talk about dimensions one more time. Remember, the dimensions of a matrix is the number of rows by the number of columns. Here I have 2 rows, so this is a 2, and I have 3 columns, 1, 2, 3, so this is a 2 by 3. And I see here I have the same exact thing. I have 2 rows, and I have 1, 2, 3 columns, so this is a 2 by 3. So again, remember, unless these are exactly the same number of rows and the same number of columns, I cannot add and subtract, all right? All right, so the first thing we're going to do is add the 2, and the way that I add matrices is just by simply adding each element. So 1 plus 0, all right? And then I move on to the next element, -2 plus -1. And then I move on. So each element in one matrix, I add it to the corresponding element in the other. 5 plus a -5. Okay? 3 plus a -3. -4 and 1. And -1 and 2. Okay? So that's how I do A plus B. So when I come down here and write what the result would be. 1 plus 0 gives me 1. -2 plus a -1 gives me -3. 5 plus a -5 gives me 0. 3 plus a -3 gives me 0. -4 plus 1 gives me -3. And -1 plus 2 gives me a +1. So again, I just add each element, each corresponding element to each other and put it in the new matrix. And notice that if I use the element in the first row and the first column, plus the element in the first row, first column, and then I stick it into the first row, first column. So I got 1 plus 0 gave me 1. And that's how we add a matrix. Not very difficult at all. The next problem was 2a minus 3b. And the way that I multiply a matrix by a scalar or a constant, it can be written this way, or in other words like this 2, is simply by multiplying every single element in the matrix by that number. So A times 2 would become, I'm just going to multiply every single element. 1 times 2 is 2, -2 times 2 is -4, 5 times 2 is 10, 3 times 2 is 6, -4 times 2 is -8, -1 times 2 is -2. Okay, so I just simply multiply every single element of my matrix by that number. And now I'm subtracting, so I'm going to leave my negative sign there. And now I want to multiply every single element of B by 3. 0 times 3 gives me 0. 3 times -1 gives me -3. 3 times -5 gives me -15. 3 times -3 gives me -9. 3 times 1 gives me 3. And 3 times 2 gives me 6. All right? And now, just as before, when I added, I'm going to subtract. So I'm going to have 2 minus 0, and I'm going to put that in the same spot. 2 minus 0 gives me 2. -4 minus a -3, so in other words, -4 plus 3 gives me a -1. 10 minus a -15, or in other words, 10 plus 15 gives me 25. I've got 6 minus a -9, or in other words, 6 plus 9 is going to give me 15. -8 minus 3 is going to give me a -11. And -2 minus 6 is going to give me a -8. All right? So nothing very difficult about it. I'm just going to add each corresponding element or subtract each corresponding element and put it in the same position in my new matrix. And if I'm asked to multiply by a constant or a scalar is what they call it, I simply multiply every single element in the matrix by that number.